Hi, Dan Miller, High Tech on Slack. Presentation that I've got here is about the new mesh room and automation. Really, it's about the automation in the new mesh room, but it's kind of impossible to talk about the automation inside of there without talking about where we are now. So can't talk about the new mesh room without talking about the old mesh room first. Where we're at right now for this presentation across the street is the soon-to-be destroyed, condemned building that we have been inhabiting for the last 3 years. We had a month to leave and get out of there. A lot of memories. Want to say thanks to Grand Street Guild for hosting us for the 3 years. That was amazing to have a physical space. Prior to that, we had no physical space and everyone was kind of just operating out of their homes. So kudos to the Grand Street Guild in the old mesh room, node number 1932 and 1934. Lots of things that went on there. We had a call for help. Thanks to Leiden, Julian, and Matt. We put out a thing saying, hey, we're about to be homeless. We have like 3 weeks. Where can we go? We got a bunch of equipment. We didn't really know what we wanted to do. We didn't know if we wanted a storage facility, if we wanted a new place that we could host people. We didn't feel like we had a lot of options given the amount of budget that we really wanted to afford to spend in such a thing because we like to spend our money well. So we put out a call to help for the community and we got a reply at Blue Stockings Bookstore. And this is thanks to Jay, Jory, and Devani. So they got back to us within I think a week. We quickly went out and did a site survey with it. A few of us showed up, videoed, found that the basement looked like a pretty cool spot, jumped on it and created this, expanded node number 3065, which actually had mesh on it already to begin with. Quickly, there was packing, big effort, 20 plus volunteers. There was a lot of stuff in the other building that needed to get binned up and put away. So thank you to everybody that showed up to pack everything up inside of boxes. Then quickly after that, we realized we didn't want to move in given the state of what the basement looked like. Our site survey, we found some mold, we had some water on the floor. It wasn't particularly nice. So you don't want to move nice things in until you make it pretty first. So special thank you to Rob, Ash, Scott, and John who jumped on that.
Worth mentioning as well,
just
as a side note, Blue Stockings was already a mesh member. We've had them hooked up for a couple of years. I don't even remember who did the install, so that's why we were able to get them so quickly. Yeah, Brian and Sean. So, they were certainly happy to help us out.
They were happy to help us out. They actually saw us on Slack too, jumped inside the channels with it. So that was great. A lot of cleanup. Conveniently, I was gone on work travel during all of these parts, and that was nice. So got to watch all these wonderful photos and videos from afar and did not have to put on the bunny suits that everyone here has shown. But I did tell people to do things, which was fun to see it get executed. Next was shelving prep and door locks. So this space wasn't really designed to accommodate storing some relatively expensive equipment. So we wanted to make sure that there was no issues with, we put our stuff in a basement, it just kind of disappears one day. We've had a locked space for the last 3 years. And so we've kind of become accustomed to that. So a lot of people here that got on the let's build shelves and put in the door locks and make it immediately inhabitable. So that's Rob and Larry and Scott and Leiden and James, John, Matt, and Daniel. So some great photos here of moving things down streets of New York, all the shelving, and then putting on some nice, safe, we had the deadbolts were on the wrong side of the doors to lock you in. So we improved that and made it so that you can actually escape and have egress points as opposed to being padlocked into the scary, dark basements.
Yeah, Rob did a really good job here, put crash locks on it so nobody can get locked in. But it's also really well secured. We have keys for all the key volunteers and a key box there as well so people can get in to get what they need.
Yep, same key box that we've been using for the last 3 years over here, has spare keys inside of it. So if you're not one of the people who have key entry, myself specifically, I don't have key entry. You just know the code, you can use it and get inside. So no different than what the current state was. So then moving day happened, a lot of stuff. You can see in the bottom picture here, here's 151 across the street. It's about to get demolished and everything is getting vacated out of there into this nice U-Haul. And then it pops up on the street in front of Blue Stockings there in the top. And you see in the top right photo, all the things that we decided we didn't need, that's all gonna get destroyed.
I would just add, yeah, it was really incredible how many people turned out, both for the packing and for the moving. A lot of people who have never come to a meeting or maybe just, didn't really participate. It was just such an incredible turnout, and it would have cost us thousands of dollars to pay movers. It would have cost us a lot of pain and suffering to do it with, 3 or 4 or 5 people. So I think we knocked this whole thing out in like 4.5 hours. And that entire truck was full, and then it was half full again on the second move. So just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was amazing seeing how painless this looked from afar. So as it stands as of today, here is our new mesh room. So this is specifically looking at the workshop and the storage room. So those are the two furthest back spaces. So what you see in the bottom left image is the storage area. And it's basically just a whole bunch of boxes where our equipment is. That's 2 sets of locks in the back, so it's the most secure room. And then there's a workshop in front of it. And the workshop right now just kind of has tables and tools on it. We're kind of in the midst of rehabbing that a bit more. Part of that rehab that happened ahead of time that people came in was to make the storage room very nice and clean, because we figured that if you put all this stuff in there, you're never gonna ever get it nice after. So hit it up quick. The workshop has potential and legs to kind of get worked on at any point in time if need be. Also, bonus, entry and office. So there's more rooms. So some of these, the back rooms are a little bit more industrial, where the front rooms are a little bit more office nicey, comfy feely. So we've got a wall there that you can see. We've got all of our networking gear on, and then you can see that quite a few people can fit inside that space. And then there's a front kind of hangout chill room. So it's communal. It's not just a storage facility. So that was kind of our bonus. If we could have it, we'd love it. That was kind of like a soft ask, right? That's pretty cool that we were able to get a space that has this capacity inside for it too, because that's again something we've become accustomed to over the last 3 years, is the ability to host events like this. Although we can still have this type of a thing here every Tuesday, we have a hack night. I totally miss that bug still, and so, quarterly or monthly, we have these types of presentations, but then every week we kind of have a hack night get together, and having a space that allows us to do that type of a thing was really nice. So it's cool to be able to continue having that.
John's going to set that couch on fire.
I found a new one to replace it if he does in my drawers. So that said, we have some issues. So this starts to get into the parts where the automation is going to seek into. High humidity, leaks from rain, some electrical stability concerns, shared access control, where we used to be the only people that had control over our space, and now we have slight shared access in some of the parts, and some limited mesh speeds, and then usability that we have past storage, so more than just storage. As you can see, this is the 3D model as alluded to in the prior presentation before this, where I just took my iPhone, ran around, took a scan of the place. It's got a millimeter wave sensor on it if you have a Pro iPhone for like the last 3 generations. And 3D scanner tool can kind of put together this photogrammetry laid on top of a LiDAR model. So first hitting network connectivity. So thanks to Matt, Scott, Sean, and Daniel, who bumped us up. So instead of 5 gigahertz, we got 60 gigahertz now. You can see speed tests, 925 megabits per second each way. So we've got pretty much gigabit service over there, and then 5 gig fallback to it. And by adding that antenna, we also added a WAP so that we have a faster router. And you can see the WAP in the bottom, in the middle towards the bottom, that little rectangle white guy. That's an access point, but it's got a faster chip inside there, and it can route basically up to gigabit. And you can see the Cube Pro that's mentioned there at the top, in the left image at the top left of that pole stack. And that's pointed over at the rooftops over here. So similar to how we used to have access inside of this place, we have very similar access over there. And you can also see Scott there at Blue Stockings upstairs with the rabbit ears as he's fishing the cables from the rooftop to downstairs, getting us some nice fast internet from the rooftop down. So we solved the network connectivity. Leaks, this was last night. It rained, and we've been trying to trace down why the floor keeps getting wet and why the mold keeps growing. And we found a few interesting things. There's a pipe that we saw leaking, and it's a drain pipe from the rooftop, and it's got a patch on it, and the patch looks like it's failed. So we just need to replace the patch. We should be fine. But in the meantime, we've got water on the floor. You can see one of the leak sensors there in the bottom right that I've got for the automation. It's about to start up anytime soon here in the presentation, and we're using it to measure when these puddles show like this. Also, that hole goes into a scary room that's not ours, that's in the back. That I put a snake camera inside of there, and I've got some ideas of what it is, but it's not for us.
I would just add, right, the storage room in the back has no water issues, right?
Yeah.
So all of our equipment is quite secure. The workshop is a little damp,
Yes.
and we're working on fixing that, but it is not an unsafe place to be, and our equipment is not at risk of being destroyed because of heavy rains or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah, we've been monitoring this for the last month or so, and it's about the same amount of water ingress that's happened every time, and we spent that time ahead of time trying to make the storage space nice so that we wouldn't have problems on move-in. You can see this start, so that the image, you can see where the water leak starts, goes along the wall, and then goes to that pool area inside that bonus room that's not ours. And you can see that it kind of steers away from that stock room there in the back corner. Special thanks to Rob, who put on the bunny suit last night and climbed in the hole. So into the automation now. Now, the space, so Home Assistant, I got pretty deep into this a while ago. My house is insanely automated. So this operates as a glue. It's accessible by a lot of people. It's manageable. I think it's the #1 project on GitHub for community worldwide. It's quite a well-known thing. I had a Raspberry Pi 4B that was just sitting doing nothing, so I donated that to the mesh room, and I loaded HAOS, where you can see on the chart here is basically the everything. Instead of it being container or a core or supervised where you're running it from something else, it takes over and it's the full OS on here. And that allows you to get just easy manageability for it. It does backups, it does one-click updates, it has add-ons, it runs Docker under the hood for containers. It just makes life super easy and makes it more accessible for people to use rather than independently hosting those things yourself. So with that as the core of the automation hub, we needed some measurements to solve these problems, like address the humidity, address the water leak before last night when we figured out where the source is. So we've been band-aiding it for the last few weeks. Presence, because it's a shared space. So PIR sensors, like old motion sensors like people used to have for their home security systems, as well as millimeter wave that can track multiple objects, like 5 objects simultaneously, and see whether they're at the room at the same time. Door contact sensors. We wanted to sniff the outlets, being good neighbors and subletters. So we wanted to make sure we're not imposing too much on the people that we're subletting a space from, so we can measure the wattage of what our impact is against them. Network bandwidth, we want to know how well our network is performing there over time, and also light intensity to see if somebody left the lights on, right? As well as other reasons. So the easiest way is Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The Pi had Bluetooth built in. Wi-Fi we have in the room, so it's trying to stick around with sensors. That switch bot you see in the bottom right corner, that's Bluetooth and Wi-Fi native. Bluetooth and then Wi-Fi backup if need be, because it's a little bit more power intensive. And those were, I want to say, like $12-ish a piece or something for sensors, and they just worked, right? No extra hubs, no Zigbee, no Thread, none of these other additive things. So in terms of integrations, each one of these is kind of poking into a different ecosystem, right? So this starts out with like one or two, and you build on from there. This is what we currently have installed as of today. So I strive to make this all locally hosted and isolated. So you can see an icon on the bottom right corner of anyone that has, if it's got a little globe, it needs to talk to the internet. So obviously if you're connecting to Slack, you need to connect to Slack servers. So that has to reach out. If you're trying to get the weather from AccuWeather.com, that has to reach out. But pretty much everything else, or speedtest.net, if you're doing a speed test, you got to reach out. But everything else pretty much is locally hosted inside of the room, requires no outside access. So if the internet gets cut, and you don't need to reach out to anyone's cloud servers, it just runs within the room forever. Hacks, Home Assistant Community Store. So this is like if something is not a cross-tested, proven, trusted part of Home Assistant, you can just take any GitHub repo and you can just pull it in and it runs it as a Docker container underneath it. So there's some of these, if you see the little box in yellow in the bottom corner to the right, those are ones that I pulled in from Hacks because there's nothing that is native Home Assistant that covers that. So where I want to say Home Assistant has like 5,000 integrations or something ridiculous, that probably has like 50,000 or something that are on there. So it's just this insanely extensive thing, right? If you would get a new robot vacuum or something and it doesn't exist, someone can scrape together some code on GitHub, drop it in, goes on Hacks, and then you have full access. So once you get integrations in, we have dashboards, right? So we want to see that we're getting the data. So these are some examples of data that's being pulled from the different humidity and temperature sensors. So you can see in the left column here, I've got humidity and temp for the office space, the workshop space, and the storage space. You can see them graphed over time with temperature, humidity, and dew point that John loves. He loves his dew point. And then on the top right, you can see a dehumidifier that we purchased that's added in there as well. And you can see the card for that for control on it. And then a little time graph that shows the states of, I made a state machine for wet and for leaks and if dehumidifier is running. And so we can see over time when these things are occurring. So it's helpful to visualize these things to get an idea of like what is happening before you go to make automations from it. For dashboards that are related to network, things like bandwidth, latency, uptime, and utilization. So we can see all of that information from our MikroTik router, that WAP. There's an integration for it, as well as we do a periodic speed test. And so you can see in the bottom right corner there, those megabits per second that are getting delivered down. I think the pi may be limited on the factor of the speed test there and why we're not getting the gigabit that was shown before. You can also see when people are connected in the mesh room, get an idea if people are in the room or not. That's the helpful statistic for figuring out occupancy. And voltage and memory and CPU and all those other great things that we can get provided from that. For power, I mentioned trying to be nice to our neighbors. You can see exactly what our electric usage is day by day from 8 smart plugs that we've got. They're on the highest wattage items. Things that are intelligent to have on there, as you can see, like one of them is a space heater that, like, if someone leaves that on and forgets to turn it off, there's an automation that yells at them verbally in the room once they leave, and then it posts it to the Slack channel and says someone was just in there and they left a space heater running. Shame them. And we can also measure the quality of voltage. So one of the things that we were told on the way in is that, hey, sometimes like breakers go off and like things might fail because some of the upstairs circuits are tapped to the same as the downstairs circuits, and we want to know an idea if our stuff trips and breaks. So this gives us a feedback and reporting tool right away on it. So we can see if what we're using our electricity on. Another useful one of that on is there's a sump pump. And so with the heavy rains, we've not been sure with the leaks if that was coming from the floor, if it was coming from a pipe. We now know it's from the pipe. But the sump pump, we can measure and see when it's running to get an idea if there's a water issue there. For presence, it's a combination of PIR sensor on every door, millimeter wave on the front end when you walk in the first space, contact sensors in each door, Wi-Fi connections, and beacons. For example, I have a beacon that emits Bluetooth Low Energy on my keys, and everywhere I go, it authenticates me where I go. Same thing with my Oura Ring. Things like that can be trained to people so that if you like want it to do a privileged state or something like that when you're around. At my house, personally, I use it for like de-authenticating my cameras, so that if I'm in the house, the cameras turn off. So presence, it's useful to know, like, are we even using the mesh room, right? Like, what is the impact of us using the space? Are people ever there, or is it just to grab and go and take stuff, just for an idea of like what the cost value impact is of having such a space? In terms of security, I mentioned this is a shared space, so we do not have, the front two rooms are not keyed, our office and our front area. So that could be entered by anyone at any point in time that is at Blue Stockings. So we do have a lot of expensive equipment. We don't, expect anything bad's going to happen, but plan for the worst and have information for it. So these are locally hosted RTSP streaming only cameras that are limited to the network that is only within the mesh room. So although this is on the mesh, I from my house cannot tap into the camera feeds from this. They go into Home Assistant, and you can reach into Home Assistant from it, but it's not like someone can sniff into them. We also have the audio disabled by default on them, so it's video only. And it's in the front two spaces that are looking at the incoming doors to see basically if someone enters the space. You can see that there's a spot there on the top that says member present, and it's not lit right now. Like I was saying, I have a beacon on me. That's an example of one way to de-authenticate the room. The idea is we want mesh members to be able to de-authenticate the room so that the cameras can not record when we enter inside the space, but we only get positives when someone comes into the room that is not a mesh member, right? Because we don't need to record ourselves. We don't need to, the point of this is not for that. The point of this is if someone comes inside of the space that we did not expect. So this was installed, I think I did this last week, and we're working on various different mechanisms and on ways that the community can come into the room and say, I am a member. One of them is you can just click a switch that's inside a Home Assistant, and it just says, it gives you authentication. Another one is passive with an item that's like a tracker. Another one is a wake word. So we have an assistant on the door, and that's used for text to speech, so that like when an event happens, it verbally announces it to you. Like you forgot to turn the space heater off, it will tell you. For that, we could say like only internal mesh known passphrase, and then that would verbally re-announce to you that you've been authenticated into the room and that it's turning it off. Also, the cameras are programmed so that they have an LED on them, and the LED is being direct driven by me to say you are being recorded. So it's a positive identification that you have not correctly authenticated yourself into the space if you see that LED on either camera lit. And there you can see the little river. That was, I want to say that might have been last night when we were chasing the problem early in the day yesterday before we showed up. Another useful thing, train dashboard. The credit on this one goes all to Leiden. This gives you an idea of if service is good or not good, or not scheduled, and then also what the service changes are. And this gives you an idea when you're in the space of how the trains are running. Also, all these little smart devices, we want to know if their batteries are running out. And so we're visualizing what the battery percentages are, as well as what the signal strength are for each of them. So all of that stuff, it's all dashboards. You can access it over a web browser or the Home Assistant app, and you can hook to it. Or when you're inside of the mesh room where you'd be using or caring about most of this stuff, we have a kiosk display that you can see on the monitor on the bottom right. And that just passively shows you updated versions of what you see here. So there's a visualization of the space where the sensors are at, with the state machines are on the outside for it. And then you also can see the critical, most important things like weather, train status, bandwidth latency, and the humidity and temperature and state changes over time. And so with all this data being visualized, automations are really the goal that we're going after for this, so that we don't have to manually do some type of action with it. So these are the current automations that are inside of the space. Most of them are designed around mitigating leaks. One example is if the humidity goes high in any of the three rooms, over 70% humidity, or if there's physical water leaks on the ground, or if the sump pump runs. Although I found out that the sump pump is hooked to the shower, so right now it's more of a shower tracker. Then there's a shower in the basement. It is not hooked to the sink or toilet, thank God, which I also checked. But the shower it is. So right now it goes off if you run the shower. So that found an interesting race condition last night. So that was disabled, but the temperature, the humidity or the water leaks on the floor will run 2 fans that blow at the little river area. And then it also cranks the dehumidifier down to the highest level possible that it can run at. And so to conserve energy, we only do that at the times that it's needed to be. And then once it's decided that the room is not humid enough and doesn't have leaks, it drops the dehumidifier down lower. For things like sense and presence, it can tell you, are people in the room? It keeps an ID on a state machine of like when there is presence inside of the space. That changes things like knowing, did you leave the space heater on? Did you leave the lights on? Did you close the front door is an interesting one because we do have an interesting front door to our space. And so there was one instance where someone didn't shut the door and left for the day and it was just wide open. And this will now actually complain in Slack and say someone left after 15 minutes if they didn't close the front door and presence has stopped. And presence is monitored by being in any room, and it's constantly monitoring every single room through PIR and millimeter wave, and also Wi-Fi being present on it. So it pretty much knows if you're in the space. Also that notifies faces. So there's verbal TTS, text-to-speech announcements. So anytime that a state changes, it will announce to you, like it'll welcome you into the mesh room. And it will tell you when you leave, if you leave the door open, it'll tell you if you left the thing on. I think I set it up to say if you took a shower as of last night.
It's very dystopian.
There's a variety of fun ones out there. Also to do things like measuring speed. So they're on pull, they're not push. So you have to pull speedtest.net and we do that hourly. We also nicely shut that off if it's raining so that we can serve bandwidth because that's when our 60 gigahertz links seem to have issues and monitoring the power, right? So if things get turned off that should remain on, critical infrastructure like our routers or antennas that are plugged in through one of them, it will auto turn them back on, default state to on, and it will yell at you and say, don't do that. So mention more about this TTS voice. So we get notifications in Home Assistant itself. In the top there, you can see, it's probably a little hard to see, and I don't know if I want to try this or not. Nope. It says like something got wet, started with a leak detector in the workshop, and then it said turning the dehumidifier down to 35% at max setting. And then the wetness is severe since it hasn't cleared itself within an hour. And at that point, it decides to post to Slack about it because we don't want to annoy Slack people too much if there's just small amounts of humidity changes in there. And then another one showing contact sensor being opened and then person leaving because their phone came off the Wi-Fi. So all of these things, you can see welcome to the NYC Mesh room audio message that's being played by the speaker when you come in. You can see examples of the Slack notifications that are going on there in the bottom right. And in terms of backups, because this is just a little Raspberry Pi 4B, and there's a lot of invested time and effort into this. We have local backups. We also have offsite SMB backups that are off at one of the supernodes. Thanks to Scott for setting that up and hosting it. And I think that even gets hosted offsite after that. So we are very backed up. So beyond the automation part then inside of there for community, so BlueStacking's in Mesh, BlueStacking's upstairs. Some things we've done with them recently. So we're working on putting in public kiosk PCs there, similar to how we had at Grant Street. We've had some skills exchanges with them. So part of our value is not just the fact that we pay them as a subleaser, that, we fixed their broken door on multiple occasions. I think last night, Rob finally got it to swing closed nicely. So I know that they enjoy that their heating is being spent appropriately because the heating is not cheap there. And the door was being left wide open all of the time because it was being stuck in the open position and not shutting. Leaky pipes, Rob again, climbing through the hole. That was fun last night. And then also community growth. They have a group of people, and we have a group of people, and now we have one big group of people. So in terms of the space, as I mentioned, hack nights, Tuesday, 6 p.m. on. That's kind of been a thing we've been doing here for a long time. So we've had a pretty good turnout the last couple of weeks for that. I would say there's about 10-ish people or so that show up. And also for visiting the space, if the mesh room is there, blue stocking hours, they're open from 11:30 to 7:30, Tuesdays through Sundays, just closed on Mondays. And so that's how you can access the space. If you are not on the 24/7 access list, where you can see that Leiden, Sean, James, and Matt are the 4 that are on that right now. So you can't get in there past 7:30. If you're like me and you sneak in at 7 and get in, you can stay later. But I've been spending a lot of time building this automation stuff inside of there, and you can see that little ringer on the door there. So that's right in the front door outside. If anyone's down inside the mesh room and you press that, it rings us. And I think with that, questions? And automation, plugging the brand new channel that I made in Slack, that is where I've hosted all of the technical information about this in detail, far beyond what's inside of this PowerPoint.
Yeah. So first of all, super cool. Thank you so much for putting this together. I love Home Assistant. 2 questions. Are you going to do a write-up for our blog maybe about what we've done with this? Because I think this would be a super cool blog post.
Yeah.
And then secondly, how can we get access to all of these nifty dashboards that you've built?
So you can get access. So right now I have 2 accounts made for it. One of them is an admin and one of them is a read-only. But read-only allows you to change a lot of states, so it's not technically read-only. You can not change the dashboards, but you can definitely change the behavior of the space with read-only. So that's an interesting use case, I think, of Home Assistant that may not be fully thought through yet for this use case, right? But yes, many people already have access. Basically, the path that it's at right now, it's mentioned in the automation channel for access, and one of the threads is ask me for creds. And for right now, yeah, all we have is an admin one if you want to change dashboards or add it, and then a read-only if you just want to utilize the space, if you remember. It is not externally reachable. So it's externally reachable on the mesh, right? As long as you're on the mesh, you can reach it. For whatever reason, the DNS is not being propagated the way that it's supposed to. But if you just have the IP and port, it works fine. And if you're zealous enough to install the app on your phone, which then gives me lots of metadata about your phone, including your location, and I think Akash is the only individual who has done that so far. I can know his battery percentage of his phone. Yeah, you could use it through a web browser. That works fine. Or you can actually use the app, which is nice, but the app only works with one instance simultaneously. For example, I use it for my house, so I would never, ever use the app for this because that would mess up far too many great things I have going on there with my personal account. But yes, beyond just writing a post, I would actually like to invite Paulus over because the guy who created Home Assistant is here in Brooklyn. So that's quite cool. So I would like to show him the space. I hear pizza. If there's no other questions, you go.
I have a question, but it's stupid. So you have a bunch of sensors incoming, and there's a shower in there. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it is just outside our demarcation zone, but in the top right of that photo, right before you walk into our area, there is a bathroom, and then there is a actually very, very nice tiled large shower that for whatever reason the drain empties into the sump pump, which then gets pumped out.
Could you have an odor sensor that suggests you take a shower?
I have 150 sensors at home. I do
My
not
question
have, I do
is the
not
same.
have an odor sensor, but I don't know if I'd want that for myself. But I do have a teeth brush sensor, and I have an automation about brushing my teeth.
What? I'm gonna 50. I'm gonna pick your brains out there.
Cool. All right. Thank you.